I've got full belief in myself, full belief in the players. I will turn these results round. From my point of view, the only thing we can do now to turn this around for the club and for the fans is win football matches.
Okay, let's have a look at another one. How does it feel, Gary, to lose 7-0?
In 2015, the world stood witness to arguably one of the strangest managerial appointments in football history. Gary Neville, Manchester United legend, pundit extraordinaire, business magnate, took over the reins at Valencia, the 5th most successful club in all of Spain. It was his first ever job as a head coach. The fans were revolting against the ownership, and he could not speak a word of Spanish. Actually, that's not true. He knew a few words.
You stick an O on it, and an English word, just stick an O on it, you're all right.
The result? 119 days of misery, ridicule, and constant reminders of how out of his depth he was.
I remember looking in my mirror in the morning thinking I look ill, and I remember thinking, I am nowhere near that.
Levels.
The truth is that Gary Neville did what most pundits and talking heads have never and will never dare to. As someone more accustomed to holding the gun, he decided to step into the firing line. Regardless of what you think of the man, that alone is very commendable, even if perhaps a tad regrettable. So how did all of this happen? How much of it was Neville's fault? And would he do it again?
The reason that I can say quite categorically that it will never happen is because
Valencia is a very large fish in Spanish football, with a passionate fan base, a 50,000-seat stadium, and a strong history of domestic and European success. In fact, they hold the 5th most La Liga titles in the country. However, by 2014, despite hanging around the top of the non-Barcelona Real Madrid pile for a while, they had gotten themselves into money problems, an estimated 300 to 400 million euros worth of money problems. They had also failed to qualify for European competitions for the first time in 16 years, finishing 8th in the 13-14 year. The roots of the money trouble was one as old as time, a new stadium, or perhaps hopes of a new one. The Mestalla Stadium, an over 100-year-old stadium, was set to be replaced by the new Mestalla Stadium, and the promise of multi-purpose revenue was very tantalizing indeed. So, in 2007, construction began on this new 80,000-seater project. However, when the Spanish property market crashed, the plan did too. They could not sell the old Mestalla land for the money they expected, and they could not afford to finish the new stadium. These are some early pictures of early concepts of the structure. Very futuristic, very modern. This is what the site looked like, half completed, in early 2009. Valencia had already spent about 150 million euros on the new stadium before shovels were dropped entirely, leaving it in this state for almost 2 decades. Debts only ballooned from then on, forcing them to sell club assets to make up the shortfall, including training facilities and stars: David Villa, David Silva, Juan Mata, Jordi Alba, Roberto Soldado. Safe to say the support were not pleased, but perhaps there were better days ahead. In 2014, Peter Lim, a Singaporean billionaire, paid just under 100 million euros for a 70% stake in Valencia. No doubt the skeptics had their doubts about what was going on here, but at the same time, the man was whispering sweet nothings in the ears of all those who would listen. He promised to end the player fire sales, to bring back Champions League football, to force the completion of the stadium. So, many fans welcomed him, even if it sounded too good to be true. They were like me when I send a risky text at 2 a.m. You have to believe. Lim's first move, initially at least, turned out to be a winning one. Seeking stability, in came up-and-coming Portuguese manager Nuno Espirito Santo as head coach. He was an immediate success. Valencia finished 4th and looked to be back on track as Nuno Espirito Santo won La Liga Manager of the Month 3 times. He also snatched 4 points from Real Madrid with a 2-1 victory against them at home and a 2-2 draw at the Bernabeu. That's not too bad, right? Well, there was more than meets the eye. So far, we have Peter Lim and we have Nuno Espirito Santo in this story, but we haven't introduced the third party that brought the whole thing together. Jorge Mendes, football's most influential power broker and super agent. The man who brought Cristiano Ronaldo to Manchester United back in 2003. The man who negotiated Jose Mourinho to Chelsea. The man whose fingerprints are all over some of the biggest European player deals in the modern era. But he doesn't just do players. In fact, industry reports and those close to the negotiations identified him as the primary facilitator who paved the way for Peter Lim to purchase Valencia. It seems that, in exchange, he was allegedly given free rein to send anyone he deemed fit to Valencia and charge whatever he wanted, all on the club's dime. You see, Nuno Espirito Santo was Jorge Mendes' first ever client as an agent, a relationship that dated back to 1996 when Mendes, who was primarily a nightclub owner, brokered a $1 million transfer for a young goalkeeper from Vitória Guimarães to Deportivo La Coruña. Across 2014 and 2015, Valencia would go on to sign André Gomes, Rodrigo, João Cancelo, and Enzo Perez, all Mendes-linked players from Benfica. Of course, it did not take long for allegations of malpractice to flood in. Several parties, both attached and not attached to Valencia, would later file complaints alleging that the fees were inflated, with Lim and Mendes splitting the difference. The Spanish anti-corruption prosecutor investigated, but they found insufficient evidence. Still, nothing says suspicious quite like being formally investigated in an industry driven by public opinion. The culture within the club's management shifted overnight, and it appeared that nobody was on board with the ownership. Technical directors and scouts were leaving left, right, and center. Club president Amadeo Salvo resigned. Sporting director Francisco Rufete walked away. Both hinted at the ongoing allegations, investigations, and overall club turmoil as core reasons for their departures. If you're wondering how the club was supposed to perform now that their entire management structure had been gutted, I have a spoiler for you. They did not perform. At the start of the 15-16 campaign, the club lost more key players and fell to 9th by late November. So by this point, open chance of Nuno out rang around the Mestalla. By the 25th of November, he was gone. This is what many in the industry would call a crisis. Nuno Espirito Santo was always seen as Mendes' man, so even though results were good under him for a while, it seems the support never fully embraced him. But that's not to say that they flat out hated him or bore some serious ill will. I mean, how could they, when they were unsure how much influence he actually had while being their manager? To quote Sid Lowe of The Guardian while speaking on the decisions made in the Nuno era, were they Nuno's decisions? What's the plan for Valencia? What's the criteria when it comes to signing? What are they really hoping to achieve? And why isn't that explained? What lies beneath? End quote. Again, I say, crisis. Ironically, one of the largest voices of the industry who routinely throws this exact word around for other clubs in bad times was chosen to fill the void. 602 appearances for Manchester United, 8 Premier League titles, 2 Champions League trophies, 3 FA Cups, captain from 2005 until his retirement in 2011, with a Premier League Hall of Fame induction awarded in 2025. Gary Neville was not the biggest, was not the quickest, was not the most technically gifted, but the man was extremely reliable and the definition of a Manchester United and football legend. After hanging up his boots, Neville carved out a second career, joining Sky and quickly becoming one of the most respected analysts in British football.
Roberto, Gary Neville, I bet I never thought you'd be interviewed by me.
In fact, Neville's understanding and his extraordinary ability to communicate said understanding got a few people thinking the same thing. This man could do well in a coaching setup. Well, funnily enough, he was actually trained to do exactly that. He had collected his pro coaching license and was then appointed to Roy Hodgson's coaching staff with England in 2012. He served in that role through Euro 2012, the 2014 World Cup, and part of the early stages of Euro 2016 qualifying. But then again, it's one thing to be knowledgeable and another to put it into practice. Neville himself has admitted to turning down 2 or 3 head coach roles while at England, as he felt he was not the man for the job. After all, he was only really doing video analysis for England, i.e., the exact same thing he was doing for Sky.
And obviously I was working as a coach under Roy, but I was doing more of the video work with Roy, and Roy and Ray were doing the coaching, and I was doing the more analysis type stuff that I was doing on Sky.
Still, Neville was aware of the optics. He believed that after working as a pundit for so long, criticizing coaches for being underqualified, hired based on connections, and ripping their decisions apart, he may not be able to keep turning the offers down for long.
But if I'd have turned down this job, I think I could have said goodbye to credibility in football, because this is an unbelievable football club with a huge history. Sitting on television in this last few years, talking about coaches, the time has now come for me to stand up.
I skipped forward a little bit, but that was Neville in his first Valencia press conference. Now, I can tell what you're thinking. How is he now Valencia's head coach? Well, as with everything in life, following the money gives us all a clear reason. As soon as he retired from playing, Neville seemed to have a penchant for being involved in as many businesses as possible, one of which was the one you'd think would be the most natural. Along with some members of the class of '92, he took control of Salford City Football Club. By early 2015, 50% of that club was owned by Peter Lim. But it was not just Salford City. He had partnered with Neville on various other ventures, hotels, cafes, and more. Everything's starting to piece together now, isn't it? Neville has at least been very honest about all of this in the past, and in turn regarding why he ultimately took the job.
When Peter rang me, I just felt that he'd supported me and the lads in obviously Salford in other business ventures, and he wanted just somebody to navigate him to the end of the season that he trusted.
He was simply there to act as a 6-month stopgap until the end of the season. Nothing more, nothing less. However, we cannot discount the fact that Neville knew the magnitude of this particular favor, what the implications were, and said yes anyway. And this is where ego comes into play. Quote, being a good analyst is not the same as being a good coach. Valencia is not a team for experiments. It's not a place for a coach to get his apprenticeship. It is one thing to give your opinion, and another to get things working on the pitch. Club legend Santiago Cañizares issued this statement when it all kicked off. Evidently, he was not wrong. What was Neville's playing and coaching philosophy? What were his opinions on Spanish football? Did he even have any? Did he even have any reason to have any, apart from the 2 or 3 times a year he would play Real Madrid or Barcelona in the Champions League as a player, or commentate on their games as a pundit?
It's Torres to give Chelsea a place in the Champions.
At the very least, his brother Phil Neville was already at Valencia as an assistant coach to Nuno Espirito Santo and had a reportedly decent relationship with the players. João Cancelo, Dani Parejo, Paco Alcácer, Skodran Mustafi, Rodrigo, Andre Gomes, and Alvaro Negredo were just some of the players he took charge of. These were all very serious players, so Neville and Valencia were not lacking for talent. From the outside looking in, it seems Neville had the best intentions. It's just that his execution may have been a tad short-sighted. Upon arrival, he intended to revolutionize how things worked at the Mestalla. He revamped the club's data capture and analysis departments, giving each player an iPad to improve video review. He took interest in the club's branding, holding meetings with the commercial department. He ultimately intended to arrive, put a bunch of systems in place, and then hand the next manager a state-of-the-art operation. Now, if you haven't clocked on by now, this is all corporate talk. It's the act of optimizing systems for a frictionless experience and identifying synergies. In other words, Neville was trying to coach the club the same way he ran his businesses. And while doing all of this, it seems that he overlooked his biggest issue: Spanish. Communication is probably the second most important skill in the entirety of the footballing industry, and it's a very close second to actually knowing how to play. Few workplaces have such diversity in nationalities, with leagues constantly being inhabited by foreign talent. And even with that in mind, La Liga has famously always been pro-Spanish, boasting the lowest percentage of foreigners across the top leagues by a very wide margin. As of 2026, just under 44% of players in La Liga are foreign. The closest in the top 5 leagues is the Bundesliga with 59%. How often have we seen football managers go to a top 5 league and be even mildly successful without having a firm grip on the language? And I'm not talking about understanding words, maybe being able to say a few phrases here and there. I'm talking about taking charge of press rooms, being comfortable with being tested. The answer is close to zero. To give a couple of examples relevant to Spain, guys like Sir Bobby Robson and Hansi Flick, both with Barcelona, are the exception and not the rule. At the time of recording this, Hansi Flick is a 2-time La Liga winner and has taken every press conference in English. But the guy was already a World Cup winner and treble winner with Germany and Bayern Munich before he even arrived in Spain. He's not normal. Sir Bobby Robson had won a UEFA Cup with Ipswich Town, as well as league titles in the Netherlands and Portugal before joining Barcelona. Also, his translator was his assistant coach, Jose Mourinho. Gary Neville was no Hansi Flick. He may have been English, but he was no Bobby Robson. So the club hired Paco Ayestaran, a former Liverpool assistant coach and current Aston Villa assistant coach, specifically to help Neville communicate. He was fluent in both the English language and English football, as well as the Spanish language and Spanish football, meaning he could work as more than just a translator of words for Gary Neville. This was a smart move. Ayestaran had been around the block, but it didn't take someone with his experience to identify the problem. In his own words, quote, "The biggest problem Gary had was not being able to express himself. It is not the same through a translator. You can't transmit the same passion, the same emotion," end quote. As one story goes, Neville informed goalkeeper Diego Alves that he was bringing in Ayestaran as a coaching assistant. Alves misunderstood him entirely, thought the manager was resigning and Ayestaran was replacing him, and urged him not to quit and really give it a good go. There are clips of him screaming on the touchline in a form of broken, unintelligible Spanglish that nobody seemed to understand. The Neville brothers became somewhat of a running gag in Spanish media. Every week, said clips of them screaming were caught by mics and used on repeat week by week. Against Granada, Neville was accused of arguing too much by his opposing manager, to which he responded by saying, "No protesta, no protesta, f*** off." Another meme was born. I lost my confidence. It got to the point where I didn't even want to take training sessions. I was handing it over to my coaches. I felt embarrassed doing the sessions in broken English where everything was done through a translator. On the pitch, he wanted his team to play modern, progressive football, pressing high, playing out from the back, and utilizing their fullbacks to add width high up the pitch. As we've already established, he had the personnel to make this happen. Unfortunately, the game plan never truly came to fruition. His first match in charge was a crucial Champions League matchup against Lyon. The game had knockout round qualification on the line, contingent on other results going their way. Lyon, however, were already eliminated and had nothing to play for. Said results did not go their way, and they also lost by 2-0. He told his guys to press high, which they did, but they left nobody at the back and were repeatedly exposed on the break. In La Liga, he did not win for 9 consecutive matches, 5 draws and 4 losses. Quick side story, one of those, coincidentally, was a 2-2 draw at Real Madrid in his 4th game. The day after this game, Real Madrid sacked Rafael Benitez. Real Madrid then hired Zinedine Zidane as his replacement and won 3 Champions League titles in a row. So you can say what you want about his managerial skills, but if I ever hear a Real Madrid fan slander Gary Neville, I will know for a fact that you do not know ball. Moving along. The Copa del Rey and the Europa League offered some needed positivity. Valencia put up a 7-0 aggregate scoreline against Granada in the former and a 10-0 aggregate scoreline against Rapid Wien of Austria in the latter. Eventually, they reached the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey and the round of 16 in the Europa League. Those were the highlights. What came next was the lowest of the lowlights. In the Copa del Rey, they drew Barcelona. The same Barcelona that had won the treble the previous year. A Barcelona featuring Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and Neymar, all in their prime. It was a bloodbath. Skodran Mustafi was sent off, but by that point, it was already 3-0, Messi had scored once, Suarez had scored twice, and the halftime whistle had not been blown. By the end of it, Messi scored 3, Suarez scored 4, Neymar missed a penalty. 7-0. This was likely the most embarrassing result in Spanish football that season, especially considering the interest it gathered in the United Kingdom and abroad. for obvious reasons. And there may be reason to believe that this result was by design.
No, I won't sleep well tonight, for your information. I didn't like what I saw. The Valencia fans didn't deserve that tonight.
It is clear we've been very superior to our rivals. We have all enjoyed tonight.
As I said, Barca were already far gone by half-time, yet Luis Enrique elected to keep Messi, Suarez and Neymar on the pitch for the full 90. The league eventually came down to 1 point between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Barca were still fighting in the Champions League, and Barca had just played a brutal match against Atletico Madrid 3 days before in the league that included 2 red cards. All in all, Barcelona played 62 games that season and were entering the most crucial point of the year when this game was played. So, why did Luis Enrique choose not to rest his star man? No one knows what was going on through his head, but it's difficult to come to any conclusion other than this one. He wanted blood. Neville felt like an outsider, and this was not the only instance of him feeling as though he was being played with. Neville played Athletic Bilbao 3 times that season, once in the league, twice in the Europa League. In each of those games, Ernesto Valverde, Bilbao's manager, changed tactics multiple times in each game, giving him the runaround. Against Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, despite being tied 1-1 for most of the game, Atletico cranked up the heat in the final 20 minutes, scoring twice and winning. Neville felt he was being toyed with on each occasion.
Coached against Simeone. I felt as though that day he was beating me up. It was Enrique, the 7-0. At the end of the game, I was shake his hand, he walked straight past me. Thought, you know, so he's almost like saying, go home, little boy. I felt like that's what he was sort of the message he was sending to me.
The match Neville himself identified as the beginning of the end was a 1-0 defeat to Real Betis in February. He tried multiple approaches, styles, formations, and nothing worked. He already knew he was out of his depth, but this is when he realized he could not make up the distance. And the fans were not shy about letting him know that they felt the same way. Every March, the city of Valencia holds Las Fallas, a festival celebrating the return of spring. It's a festival of cultural, political, and satirical significance where the last year's bad energy is represented by various displays of art and burnt away to cleanse the community. Effigies of Peter Lim, Gary Neville, Nuno Espirito Santo, and Valencia's chairman Lei Hun Chan were burnt to a crisp. The day after Las Fallas, Valencia lost 2-0 at home to Celta Vigo. To this very day, this is the last football match that Gary Neville has ever managed. 10 days later, he was gone. When Gary Neville took over, the club was 5 points off the Champions League places. When he left, they were 6 points above relegation. So perhaps you won't be surprised to hear that by the start of the 16-17 football season, he was back in the Sky Sports studio as if the whole thing had been some kind of a fever dream. Except it wasn't. People don't forget. Every week, Neville had to endure taunt after taunt and joke after joke as his fellow presenters and viewers reminded him of how poor his Valencia stint was. Neville, however, to his credit, has a very thick skin. He took it all in his stride, joining in on his own ridicule frequently. It's quite likely that this humility is his greatest strength, especially in his media career. He's never been afraid of being the butt of the joke. After all, to many people, he is the best player in his position in the history of the most popular league on the planet, and he's very clearly an extremely successful man outside of that. But you might not think that he thinks that if you listen to him for long enough. He's truly mastered the art of self-deprecation. And because of that, the ridicule eventually stopped, and part of that was probably because nobody could actually weaponize this stint against him anymore, and he was able to continue his media career, growing it to incredible heights, to the point where he is essentially the face of Sky, and this will continue, likely for a very, very long time. It's also important to know that it's not like it was only ridicule coming his way. Alvaro Negredo, his Valencia striker, was amongst the few that sang his praise. Quote, "Perhaps in Spain at that time, due to the language barrier, he didn't get more opportunities, but in the Premier League, I would have given him more. For me, he was a good coach who came in with a very good attitude and a desire to improve." End quote. After the public humiliation that was Valencia, some people may have carried a chip on their shoulder, a desire to prove that they could succeed where many thought they couldn't. Gary Neville, ever self-aware, decided that he was better off sticking to what he was good at: media and business. Quote, "The idea that I thought I could have all the businesses, the media career, and be a head coach was nonsense. Absolute nonsense." End quote. While Neville has only really seen better days, Valencia hasn't exactly set the world alight. Paco Ayestaran replaced him as head coach, but was sacked within a month of the following season. Under Lim's ownership, the club has burned through 18 different managers in 12 years, have had relegation scares, and have consistently sold their best talent. The only manager who had some success was Marcelino. He won the Copa del Rey in 2019, achieved back-to-back top 4 finishes, only for Lim to sack him after a personal falling out. Attendance is still high, but it's often accompanied by white handkerchiefs and banners reading, "Lim, go home." Construction of the new Mestalla finally restarted in January 2025, with the club targeting a summer 2027 opening. So, yes, there is technically a shining light, but if you think that has suddenly put the fans on Lim's side, I have a bridge, or maybe an unfinished stadium, to sell you. Gary Neville's Valencia was a curious period, a stint that's regretted by almost all involved parties in some way, a meme factory that perhaps acts as a case study for how not to approach a job in a foreign country. But at the end of the day, Gary Neville took the task, and he's never shied from criticism and reflection on it. I guess at the end of the day, whatever you think of him, he has very few colleagues more qualified to commentate and analyze a club in crisis. And there we have it. Thanks so much for all those that support the channel through Patreon. Your support directly funds the editing and research of these videos. That's all for me today. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.